Looking for some decent Doctor Who flair on Facebook one day, I noticed that every other button-like graphic depicted a phrase about an Edward Cullen or about this mysterious Twilight thing. So I picked up a copy, read it, and immediately called my priest to request an exorcism due to the demon of suck that had just possessed my eyeballs for reading these cursed texts. If you've never read Twilight, then pause the video and read it, because I'd hate for you to make your entire opinion based on the mildly psychotic YouTube ranter that is me, rather than using your own brain. Seriously, I'll wait. Alright, now that you're a little more educated, here's my first impressions. A proper analogy of the series, in my opinion, would be calling the books the secret love child of Superman, Underworld, and Romeo and Juliet, which had the potential to be great, except that the baby was born with Down syndrome. The werewolf vampire thing explains Underworld, and the alluding to Shakespeare is obvious, despite the fact that relating the bard to this book feels like molesting his tombstone, but many of you may be scratching your head and pondering the Superman reference. Don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of the Man of Steel, a super being who uses his powers for the forces of good instead of making humanity his collective bitch. Superman's flaw is his godlike status, which makes him totally unrelatable. Edward Cullen exhibits this flaw to the same extent, with the downside that he has none of Superman's personality strengths. Instead of protecting humanity with his inhuman powers, he instead uses it to pick up underage girls. This makes him a Mary Sue, a character who is so perfect that he or she is completely uninteresting story-wise, who spends most of his or her time in ridiculous romances, which brings me headlong into my next point. Romeo and Juliet was a tragedy about forbidden love, albeit love between an obsessive older man and an underage twat, so Twilight stays so true so far. And in the end, Romeo and Juliet are killed, turning into the tragic martyrs of love, making the audience really feel for their sacrifice. I believe the Twilight series isn't over yet, but I'm pretty sure I know how it ends. The two live happily ever after. I'll get to Twilight's predictability later on. Don't get me wrong, I think forbidden love can be a great plot device, but when the characters get off scot-free, it doesn't make an impact because there are no consequences for their actions. That and the main character is a vampire. Sure, this is where the Underworld reference comes in, with all expandex wearing glory, but the difference between this and Underworld is that Underworld got the legend of vampires right. I'm not going to complain about how sexy Edward allegedly is, nor his affiliation with young women, because honestly Twilight is spot on in that regard. I hate to give the book points, but in old folklore vampires were supposed to be symbols of seduction and lust, luring women in so that they could feast on their life force. Twilight apparently saw that last stipulation and decided to run away from it very fast, judging by Edward's love, said in big flashy quotes, for Bella. This is where the book stops being even slightly amusing for me, and that's on its message on what love actually is. According to the book, if the girl smells nice and the guy is hot enough, nothing can possibly go wrong. If smell is your only stipulation, then Edward would have been better off in a scented candle factory. At least candles smell nicer longer and don't bitch every 2 paragraphs. Also, for as much as women complain about how shallow men are, the infatuation with Edward is utterly ridiculous. Never mind that he's over 100 years old hitting on an underage girl, or that he watches her while she sleeps, because he's so freaking gorgeous. I don't claim to be an expert at what guy traits are considered hot, but judging by the posters I've seen for the Twilight movie, there's no reason why any sane woman with a vision better than 20 kajillion over 20 should find him attractive. He looks like a goth kid dropped in third world country for 3 months and then beaten with a creepy stick. I'd like to use this opportunity to get something off my chest. Edward Cullen is not real. He will never be real, and making 20 billion pieces of flair about him won't change that fact. No guy will ever be like Edward Cullen, no matter how much you look or plead your boyfriend to change, because no man on earth wants to be that homosexual, and even other homosexuals don't want to look that creepy. Please shut the hell up, as I'm fairly sure that every time a girl wishes Edward Cullen was real, God kills a polar bear. I feel like there was something I promised to come back to. Ah yes, the plot. Lo and behold, a lonely girl named Bella is complaining about how much her life sucks. She just moved, nobody loves her, blah blah, frickin' blah. As a fond cue, Edward swings face first into the scene like George the Jungle, steadfastly swinging face first into a tree. The two fall in love in a matter of weeks, and for all the love is holy, I don't know why I even bother to go on anymore. The story can be plucked out of the brain of any junior high girl's daydreams, and saying that it's cheesy is like saying that Xbox Live users are only slightly annoying and that both are advanced understatements. It's predictable, it's a waste of time, and the ending of the series can be guessed within the first 100 pages. I know I've ragged on the book this whole time, but despite all I've said here, Twilight isn't the worst thing on the planet. From Justin to Kelly in High School Musicals 1 and 2 take the top 3 there. The persistent optimist in me pipes up at this point, saying that maybe this book was supposed to be childishly written and appealing to 14-year-old girls because most of them don't read anything longer than a Cosmo article in one day anyway. And maybe Twilight will be the gateway for them reading better books and ultimately making them better educated people. And then I remind my optimistic side that Edward sparkles.